This is the Forbidden Places Iceberg. Tier 1, North Sentinel Island. Picture yourself drifting through the Bay of Bengal after a typhoon flips your fishing boat. You wake up on an unfamiliar beach as a group of people approach. They're not wearing modern clothes, just handmade coverings and accessories crafted from bark and plant fibers, and every single one of them is armed with bows and arrows. North Sentinel sits within India's Andaman Islands and is home to the Sentinelese, a tiny community that has lived completely cut off from the outside world for tens of thousands of years. And anyone who tries to get close gets chased off, whether they're standing on the beach or flying overhead in a helicopter. To maintain this isolation, the Sentinelese want to be left alone, and the government actually listens. They stay out of the tribe's territory completely, and they even enforce a strict exclusion zone. The Navy patrols the surrounding waters, and no one is allowed within 5 nautical miles of the shore. If a Sentinelese tribesperson kills an intruder, they cannot be prosecuted. As bad as it sounds, it makes sense. 1, you were told to stay away, and 2, any modern contact with the Sentinelese is a threat to their existence. In 2018, an American missionary, John Allen Chow, attempted to visit North Sentinel Island 3 times. The Sentinelese fired arrows at him the first 2 times, but he kept returning. On the 3rd attempt, they killed him and buried his body on the beach. It was never recovered. Even a natural disaster couldn't pull the Sentinelese out of isolation. After the massive 2004 tsunami, a helicopter flew over to see if they'd survived. A Sentinelese man came out of nowhere, drew his bow, and fired. Well, that's one way to show proof of life. Contrary to what some sources like to claim, the Sentinelese aren't naive or primitive. They know the outside world is out there. They just want nothing to do with it. And honestly, you can't blame them after seeing what happened to their neighbors. The Great Andamanese went from roughly 10,000 people to around 60. The Anj dropped from about 700 to roughly 100. The Jangal didn't even get a tragic comeback arc. They disappeared entirely. The Sentinelese saw all that, whether through stories, warnings, or plain old pattern recognition, and reached a simple conclusion. Staying away keeps you alive. So while the rest of the planet argues about climate, wars, and whatever crisis is trending this week, the Sentinelese keep doing what they've always done. They stay on their island, mind their business, and survive. The Tomb of Qin Shi Huang. In 1974, a farmer in China was digging a well when his shovel hit pottery. He didn't know it yet, but he just stumbled onto the outer edge of the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the most paranoid ruler China ever produced. To understand the tomb, you need to understand the man lying in it. Qin was the most famously paranoid ruler China ever had. He burned books, buried scholars alive, and drank mercury because his doctors told him it would keep him alive forever. It didn't, but before he died, he built himself a tomb complex covering roughly 22 square miles. For context, that's bigger than Manhattan. As archaeologists dug farther from the farmer's well, the terracotta army started appearing one trench at a time. More than 8,000 life-size clay soldiers stood in formation, each with its own face, armor, and rank. They were an entire army placed there to guard the entrance to the real tomb. The actual burial chamber sits deeper underground, sealed under a 250-foot artificial hill, and nobody has been inside it. Which leads to the obvious question, why? The official explanation is simple enough. The tomb sits in an earthquake zone. The chamber is fragile, and our current excavation tools would damage the interior the moment we broke the seal. So everyone's taking the slow approach. Then there's the other reason. Ancient texts describe the tomb as a maze of traps, with flowing rivers of liquid mercury and crossbows rigged to fire when someone steps on the wrong plate. For a long time, historians treated that like dramatic storytelling. Then, soil tests around the mound showed mercury levels about 100 times higher than normal, exactly where those rivers should be. At that point, the crossbows didn't sound so far-fetched. Qin wasn't exactly a trusting man. He built multiple palaces and slept in a different one each night so assassins couldn't find him. A man like that wasn't going to leave his corpse unprotected. And the materials matter too. Those ancient mechanisms were made of bronze. Bronze doesn't rust the way iron does, which means some of those systems could still work. China treats the whole place like a delicate hazard. The exact entrance is classified. There's round-the-clock security, and radar scans keep showing huge underground spaces and odd metal readings that shouldn't be there naturally. Everything lines up with the old accounts a little too neatly. As for the farmer who started all this, the government hired them as museum staff. They now spend their days signing autographs for tourists. Qin spent his life trying to live forever. He even drank mercury for it. Now he's lying in a mercury-filled tomb nobody wants to open. Which means, in a strange way, he finally got his wish. Svalbard Global Seed Vault. You're heading into the Arctic Circle, to the icy island of Spitsbergen, where polar bears are basically the locals and humans are the tourists. Your mission is to reach the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, aka the Doomsday Vault. From the outside, it looks like something out of a science fiction movie. A concrete wedge juts out from a frozen mountain, glowing with blue-green lights at night. Inside, it's basically a sperm bank for plants. Over 1.3 million different types of seeds are stored here, representing virtually every food crop humans grow. The vault tunnel stretches about 400 feet into the mountain and stays chilled at negative 18 degrees Celsius or negative 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Even if all the electricity failed, the seeds would still be safe, because the vault sits in permafrost, and the mountain itself works as a natural freezer. So why go through all the trouble to build something like this? Well, because our food supply is more fragile than most people realize. In the 1840s, potato blight destroyed Ireland's potato crops, causing a famine that killed 1 million people. Modern farming isn't much safer. Most of our food depends on a handful of crop varieties. If a new disease spreads, everything could be destroyed. The vault has already been used once. In 2015, war destroyed a seed bank in Syria. Scientists requested their backup seeds from Svalbard, grew new plants, and in 2017 sent fresh copies back. The facility is managed by Norway and Crop Trust. Getting inside is virtually impossible, unless you're a government official or a scientist with legitimate business there. The location is extremely remote. The vault is unmanned and operates automatically. In 2017, unexpectedly warm weather caused the permafrost near the entrance to melt, sending water into the tunnel. Luckily, no seeds were damaged, but it was a wake-up call. Even a vault built to outlast civilization isn't safe from climate change. Norway spent $20 million reinforcing the structure and improving its waterproofing. Tier 2, Snake Island. You're floating off the coast of Sao Paulo, Brazil, enjoying the tropical breeze. Then you spot it, a gorgeous little island about 21 miles from shore, covered in lush green vegetation. For a second, you think, that'd be a nice place to stop. And that's exactly how people end up dead in stories like this. Welcome to Ilha de Queimada Grande, or as locals cheerfully call it, Snake Island. When your island's main export is concentrated terror, you'll find that there's no need to sugarcoat things. Scientists estimate there are between 1 and 5 snakes per square meter here. That's like if your bedroom floor was 40% snake at any given moment. The golden lancehead pit viper is the island's only resident. You won't find it anywhere else, which is probably for the best because its venom is 5 times more potent than its mainland cousins. A single bite causes immediate swelling. Your flesh starts rotting before your eyes and you bleed internally. Without treatment, you've got maybe an hour before you're explaining to whatever afterlife exists why visiting Snake Island seemed like a good idea in the first place. So how exactly did Snake Island become Snake Island? About 11,000 years ago, it was connected to mainland Brazil. Then sea levels rose, cutting it off and leaving thousands of snakes with no predators and nothing to do but multiply and get nastier. The island has no mammals for the snakes to eat, just migrating birds. Problem is, birds can fly away. So the golden lancehead developed hyper-aggressive, lightning-fast venom, specifically engineered to drop birds from the sky instantly. When a golden lancehead tags a bird, it's game over. The Brazilian Navy has declared the entire island off-limits. The only people allowed in are scientists with special permission, military escorts, and medical support on standby. There's a legend that the lighthouse here was automated in the 1920s after snakes slithered into the keeper's house and killed his entire family. It's probably not true, but it captures something real about the island. It belongs to the snakes now. Believe it or not, the venom that makes these snakes so deadly could also save lives. Researchers are looking at it for heart attack and blood clot treatments. So yeah, it's not all bad, and that's part of why the government can't just storm the island and wipe them all out. Kalaupapa. The year is 1866. You're living in Hawaii when King Kamehameha V signs a new law. Anyone diagnosed with leprosy, now called Hansen's disease, will be forcibly removed from their home and sent to a remote location. There's no trial, no appeal, and you didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to your family because you're dragged off. You're taken to a boat and shipped off to Kalaupapa, a peninsula in Molokai Island surrounded on 3 sides by ocean, and on the 4th by cliffs towering over 2,000 feet. At its peak, around 1,200 men, women, and children were exiled to Kalaupapa. and in total, more than 8,000 people were forcibly sent there. When you arrived, you were basically dumped on the beach and left to fend for yourself. The Hawaiian government declared exiled patients legally dead, even though they were still alive. Your family couldn't visit, and you couldn't leave. Kalaupapa became your home until you died. The early years were brutal. People had to build their own shelters from whatever materials they could find. They had to grow their own food or go hungry. Medical care was almost non-existent. The strong preyed on the weak. It was less a colony and more an open-air prison where society's outcasts were left to survive or perish. Everything changed in 1873 when a Belgian priest named Father Damien arrived. He came voluntarily to help the sick and dying, building homes, schools, and churches. He dressed wounds, comforted the suffering, and treated the exiled patients like human beings, deserving of dignity and respect. Father Damien eventually contracted leprosy himself and died in 1889. He's now recognized as Saint Damien by the Catholic Church. Madame Marion Cope, an American nun and later saint, continued his work caring for patients when there was no cure for the disease. She's also been recognized as a saint. Decades later, medical advances eventually made leprosy treatable, but the isolation law remained in effect until its repeal in 1969. After nearly a century of forced exile, patients were finally free to leave, but many chose to stay. After decades at Kalaupapa, it had become the only home they knew. The outside world had moved on without them. Loved ones had aged or died, and the world they remembered no longer existed. So leaving didn't make sense. Today, about 4 people who formerly had leprosy continue to live there. The settlement is now a national historical park, but access is highly restricted to protect the privacy of these remaining residents. The only way for the general public to visit the settlement is by booking a guided tour. Heard Island. You're on a tiny research boat in the middle of the Southern Ocean, getting hammered by waves. Through the fog, you spot something that makes you do a double take. A mountain topped by a volcano that's been quietly active for decades. This is Heard Island, sitting 2,500 miles southwest of Australia, halfway to Antarctica, surrounded by waters so brutal even veteran sailors turn back. The land is dominated by Big Ben, a 9,000-foot volcano that's been spewing lava and ash non-stop since at least 1947. Maybe longer, but no one's really sure because the place is too remote to monitor regularly. There's literally no safe place to land here. No airports, no harbors, no beaches. Just jagged volcanic rock and a merciless ocean. Storms can appear out of nowhere, and wind speeds reach 120 miles per hour even on casual afternoons. The temperature rarely rises above freezing, even in summer, and 70% of the island is buried under glaciers that slowly grind the land beneath them into fine rock powder. The Australian government technically owns it, but visiting is nearly impossible. You need permits they almost never grant, and even if you did get them, you'd need a boat built for Antarctic warfare, and a team crazy enough to attempt landing on an island that's spewing fire. No one has ever lived on Heard Island permanently. A few research teams have landed for short scientific studies, but no one stays year-round. It remains one of the last untouched places on Earth, because nature itself blocks every attempt. Big Ben erupts regularly, sometimes releasing just steam and ash, other times sending glowing lava flows streaking into the dark ocean. Near the volcano, hot springs stain the rocks bright yellow with sulfur. The only permanent residents here are penguins and elephant seals, who seem perfectly fine with the cold, the ash, and the isolation. Humans don't get the same treatment. Even with endless resources, the island is nearly unreachable, and surviving it is another challenge entirely. Heard Island wants no visitors, and it's very clear about that. Mount Weather. Imagine you're driving through the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, about 50 miles west of Washington, D.C. The scenery is peaceful, rolling hills covered in trees, that kind of stuff. Then you notice something strange. A heavily guarded facility with warning signs everywhere. This is Mount Weather, America's secret doomsday bunker. The Federal Emergency Management Agency runs Mount Weather, and it's not just another bunker. It's one of the biggest in the country, sitting right up there with the Pentagon's Raven Rock site. The tunnels were started in 1954 and finished by the Army Corps of Engineers under Operation High Point, which, considering the goal was to survive nuclear war, is a bit of optimistic branding. The facility was built during the Cold War when nuclear war seemed inevitable. The government needed a place where the president, Congress members, and other key officials could continue running the country even if Washington, D.C. was destroyed by nuclear weapons. The entrance alone tells you this place means business. It's protected by a guillotine gate, and a 10-foot tall by 20-foot wide 34-ton blast door that is 5 feet thick and reportedly takes 10 to 15 minutes to open or close. On top of that, the tunnel roofs are held up by about 21,000 iron bolts driven 8 to 10 feet into the rock above. Inside Mount Weather lies an underground city built for survival. It includes sleeping quarters, meeting rooms, communication hubs, a hospital, power and water systems, air filtration, and even a wastewater treatment plant. There's storage for over 500,000 gallons of water and enough diesel generators to keep electricity running for months. In short, leaders could live here indefinitely while the outside world faced nuclear fallout. Most Americans have never heard of Mount Weather, despite it being one of the most important backup facilities for the US government. Above ground, it looks like a normal office building, but the real operation lies deep beneath the mountain, hidden from public view. Tier 3. Pine Gap. If you find yourself in the Red Desert in Central Australia staring down white spheres sticking out of the desert like giant golf balls, that means you've just stumbled onto Pine Gap, one of the most secret intelligence bases on Earth. Pine Gap is located about 11 miles southwest of Alice Springs. The base is jointly operated by Australia and the United States. It opened in 1970 during the Cold War. Pine Gap's job is to spy on the entire planet. The satellite dishes can intercept phone calls, emails, text messages, and radio communications from a third of Earth's surface. The base is part of Echelon, a global surveillance network run by the Five Eyes: the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Getting anywhere near Pine Gap is extremely difficult. The entire facility is surrounded by electric fences carrying 8,000 volts. Over 80 armed security officers patrol the perimeter. The area is a restricted zone, which means anyone who enters without permission is immediately arrested. Photography is strictly forbidden, even from public roads miles away. If you break the rules, the government can confiscate your camera and charge you with crimes related to national security. Before September 11, 2001, Pine Gap offered public tours. About 800 people visited each year. But after the terrorist attacks, all public access stopped. Most Australians don't even know Pine Gap exists, and the few politicians briefed are sworn to total secrecy. Yet the facility has been tied to some of the most controversial US military operations in the past 50 years, particularly drone strikes in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Somalia, and Yemen. Pine Gap tracks signals from phones and radios to geolocate targets, passing that intel to drone operators. Thousands of militants were killed, but hundreds of civilians died too, leading human rights groups to call it potential war crimes, all while most Australians remain clueless. In 2020, the base expanded with 10 new satellite dishes. Local Aboriginal groups have protested for decades, calling the land sacred. Governments call it strategic. Either way, nobody's allowed in. Area 51. If Pine Gap is the spy base nobody talks about, Area 51 is the military base everybody talks about. It's become part of popular culture. But what is it really? Area 51 is located on Groom Lake, a dry lakebed in the Nevada desert about 80 miles northwest of Las Vegas. The CIA preferred to call it Paradise Ranch or Groom Lake. Today, the official name is Homey Airport, though most people still call it Area 51. The base was built in 1955, and it has tested everything from the U-2 spy plane to the B-2 stealth bomber. It's basically the world's most expensive UFO playground, and that's where the alien conspiracy theories come from. In the 1950s and 60s, people around Nevada started reporting strange lights in the sky and objects moving at impossible speeds. These weren't aliens. They were top-secret military aircraft. But the government couldn't admit that without exposing their spy planes, so they said nothing. Over time, curiosity snowballed into action. In 2019, a Facebook event called Storm Area 51 went viral, drawing over 2 million supposed attendees. The plan was for a huge crowd to storm the base gates all at once. The US Air Force was not amused. They responded by issuing stern warnings telling people that if the situation called for it, they were authorized to use deadly force to protect the base. When the day came, about 150 people showed up. 75 of them tried to get past the gates, but none made it past the warning signs. The mission flopped spectacularly. But those 150 people were onto something. There really is something hidden at Area 51, just not aliens. The base continues to test experimental aircraft that won't be declassified for another 20 or 30 years. The closest you can legally get to Area 51 is Tikaboo Peak, which is about 26 miles away. From that distance, you'd need a powerful telescope to see anything, so for most people, it's not worth the hassle. Interestingly, hundreds of people go to Area 51 every day for work. They have security clearances and fly in from Las Vegas on unmarked planes with blacked out windows. For them, it's just work. But for the rest of us, it remains one of America's most restricted places. Mount Yamantau. Area 51 gets all the attention, but Russia quietly runs Mount Yamantau, a giant facility hidden inside a mountain that could very well be the most classified place in the country. Mount Yamantau rises 5,381 feet in the southern Ural Mountains, about 930 miles east of Moscow. The area has been completely off-limits since construction began in the 1970s. What makes Mount Yamantau so mysterious is that nobody outside the Russian government knows what it's for. When Western intelligence agencies asked Russian officials about it, the answers kept changing. First they said mining, then food shortage. Next, they called it a nuclear war bunker, and later declared that it was used to house emergency supplies. The city supporting it is called Mezhgorye. It's a closed city with about 17,000 people. You can't just visit. You can't even find it on most Russian maps. Russian citizens need special government permission to enter, and foreigners aren't allowed. Satellite photos show extensive infrastructure: roads, railways, power lines, and large buildings. Western intelligence analysts estimate the facility could house tens of thousands of people for months or years. If nuclear missiles destroyed Moscow and every other major Russian city, the people inside Mount Yamantau would survive. They would have power, water, air filtration, food supplies, and communications equipment. Construction here kept going after the Soviet collapse, during national bankruptcy, which tells you how essential it is. Reports even mention its own power plant, underground reservoirs, and rail links. To this day, Mount Yamantau remains one of the most forbidden and mysterious places on Earth. A self-contained underground city where decades of construction support a mission important enough to remain entirely secret. Fort Knox. Not every forbidden place is off-limits for military reasons. Some are guarded because they hold something incredibly valuable. Take Fort Knox, for example. It stores America's gold. The United States Bullion Depository at Fort Knox was built in 1936, right in the middle of the Great Depression. And yeah, when people say something is as secure as Fort Knox, they really mean it. The fortress walls are granite lined with concrete and reinforced with steel. The main vault door weighs 20 tons and is 21 inches thick. Because someone in upper management is a little too paranoid, no single person knows the entire combination. It's split among several people who must work together to open it. Inside, Fort Knox holds about 147 million ounces of gold, worth hundreds of billions of dollars. That's roughly half of America's gold reserves. The security is exactly what you'd expect from a place that holds the nation's gold. There are layers of fencing, some wired to bite back, guard towers on watch, motion sensors, and infrared cameras that don't miss a thing. Armed guards patrol day and night, and even if you somehow got past them, Fort Knox sits inside a US Army base, which means you'd still have to outrun the army on your way out. The vault reportedly has a time lock and armed with booby traps inside, though the government has never confirmed the details. No visitors are allowed, period. Fort Knox hasn't given public tours since shortly after World War II. The last time journalists were allowed inside was in 1974, and they could only see a small portion of one room. Some conspiracy theories claim Fort Knox is actually empty, that the gold was secretly sold off. These theories persist because the government's extreme secrecy makes people suspicious. But most people believe Fort Knox contains exactly what the government says it does, and they keep it locked up tight because that's the smart thing to do when you're storing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of gold. Iron Mountain. Deep beneath the Pennsylvania countryside, about an hour north of Pittsburgh, lies one of the world's most secure storage facilities. From the outside, you'd never know it was there, just rolling hills and farmland. But 220 feet underground, carved into a former limestone mine, is Iron Mountain. The site was formerly owned by U.S. Steel and used to supply limestone to steel mills from 1902 to 1952. After the mine shut down, someone figured the underground tunnels were perfect for storing valuable stuff. They're safe from the weather, earthquakes, and basically anything else Mother Nature can throw at them. Today, Iron Mountain is home to some of the world's most valuable information and artifacts. This underground complex is trusted by government agencies, financial institutions, healthcare providers, and major corporations for high-security storage. The facility covers 1.8 million square feet, about 31 football fields of limestone space built to keep its contents safe. One thing that makes Iron Mountain special is that it stays cool all year. Temperatures sit around 53 to 55 degrees thanks to a 100-acre underground lake, which acts like a natural air conditioner. That stable temperature and humidity make it perfect for keeping paper, photos, film, and digital files from going bad. So what's actually in there? For starters, Bill Gates' Corbis Photo Archive and Universal Music Group's US Master Recordings, the irreplaceable originals that shape music history. But Iron Mountain isn't just about photos and music. Big companies store their most sensitive records, and government agencies keep classified files in the same tunnels. Historic photos sit next to legal documents from Fortune 500 firms, old film reels, and TV archives. Some of NASA's original moon landing footage is even down there because somehow the people in charge think the safest place for proof we went to space is under a mountain. The security at Iron Mountain is intense. Armed guards patrol day and night. Cameras follow every move, and getting inside means passing through multiple checkpoints. Even then, clients only ever see their own materials. You can't visit Iron Mountain unless you're a client with materials stored there, or you work for the company. They occasionally offer virtual tours for potential corporate clients, but the general public will never walk those underground corridors, or see what treasures lie behind those vault doors. Some mysteries are meant to stay buried, quite literally. Tier 4. Chernobyl Reactor 4. The date is April 26, 1986. An engineer at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in northern Ukraine. Just after 1:20 a.m., you're running a safety test on Reactor 4 when suddenly everything goes sideways. The reactor's power spikes, and by 1:23 a.m., Reactor 4 explodes. The 1,000-ton lid is blown off the reactor and through the roof, scattering radioactive debris into the night sky. Fires break out across the plant, and chaos erupts. This is the worst nuclear disaster in history. The Soviet government immediately evacuated Pripyat, where about 50,000 people lived. The locals were told it would only be a few days, so they packed light, locked their doors, and left their things behind, hoping to return. They never did. The Soviet military established a 19-mile exclusion zone. Hundreds of workers called liquidators were sent in to clean up. Many worked in conditions so extreme they could only stay for 40 seconds before reaching the maximum safe radiation exposure for a lifetime. They would run in, shovel debris, then run out. Construction began less than a month after the disaster, and in just about 206 days, a massive concrete and steel sarcophagus had been erected, all in a bid to contain the radiation. In 2016, workers completed the new safe confinement, a massive arch-shaped structure that cost $1.7 billion. It's designed to last at least 100 years. Today, parts of the exclusion zone are open to tourists, but Reactor 4 itself remains completely off-limits. If you stood next to the reactor core without protection, you would receive a lethal dose of radiation in under an hour. You might not feel anything at first, then hours or days later, you would start vomiting, your hair would fall out, your organs would fail, and you get the point. The land around Reactor 4 won't be safe for humans to move back in for at least another 20,000 years. Some of the isotopes there decay so slowly, their half-lives could outlast most civilizations, so you probably shouldn't hold your breath. Interestingly, wildlife has returned to the exclusion zone in large numbers. Without humans around, populations of wolves, deer, and wild boar have exploded. The zone has accidentally become one of Europe's largest wildlife preserves. How's that for looking on the bright side? Movile Cave. Not all dangerous places are man-made. Some locations have been lethal for millions of years before humans even arrived. Movile Cave in Romania is one of those spots. It's strange, toxic, and completely unlike anywhere else on Earth. In 1986, workers in southeastern Romania were drilling while preparing a site for a power plant, and accidentally broke into an underground cave. When scientists investigated, they discovered something shocking. An entire ecosystem that had been sealed off from the world for 5.5 million years. That place would come to be known as Movile Cave. The cave's atmosphere is outright poisonous to humans. There's only about 50% of the oxygen you'd normally breathe, and the air is thick with hydrogen sulfide, a gas that smells like rotten eggs and is highly toxic. If you were to breathe it without equipment, you'd quickly lose consciousness and die. Despite these conditions, the cave is teeming with life. Scientists have discovered 48 species there that can't be found anywhere else on Earth. They've evolved in total darkness for millions of years. Most of them are pale or see-through because color stopped being useful generations ago. They're blind too. but they make up for it with long antennae and legs built for feeling their way through the dark. Now here's the most amazing part. The entire ecosystem doesn't depend on sunlight. The base of the food chain is bacteria that feed on chemicals, particularly hydrogen sulfide and methane. They use chemosynthesis instead of photosynthesis, extracting energy from chemical reactions rather than sunlight. Access to Movile Cave is extremely restricted. Fewer than 100 people have ever been allowed inside. To get in, you need special permission from the Romanian Institute of Speleology. The entrance is a vertical shaft about 65 feet deep. The cave isn't that large either, just a few hundred feet across total, but it's incredibly important to science. Visitors must wear safety equipment to protect themselves from toxic air, and to protect the cave from contamination. Any bacteria brought in from the surface could disrupt the ecosystem. Movile Cave reminds us that life can exist in conditions we would consider impossible. It shows that Earth still has secrets and ecosystems we don't understand. McMurdo Dry Valleys. The McMurdo Dry Valleys are a series of largely snow-free desert valleys on the continental coastline of Victorialand, Antarctica. Now you're probably wondering, how can there be dry valleys in Antarctica, the snowiest, iciest place on Earth? The answer is wind. Powerful downhill winds blow down from the Antarctic ice sheet at speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour. These winds are so strong and so dry that they vaporize any snow before it can accumulate. The result is about 1,900 square miles of barren, ice-free valleys that haven't seen significant precipitation in millions of years. It's the largest ice-free desert on the continent, colder than anywhere else on Earth, and somehow still dry. The landscape looks more like Mars than Earth. In fact, NASA uses the McMurdo Dry Valleys to test equipment designed for Mars missions. If technology can survive here, it can probably survive on the Red Planet. Temperatures in the valleys regularly drop to negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit, about negative 45 degrees Celsius, or lower. Some areas haven't received rain or snow in over 2 million years. The air is so dry that it sucks moisture from anything exposed to it. Ice sublimates directly from solid to gas without melting. It's one of the most hostile environments on the planet. Yet, life exists here, somehow. Scientists have found microorganisms living in the soil and rocks, surviving in conditions that would kill almost any other life form on Earth. Some of these microbes survive without sunlight, feeding off minerals or chemical reactions, and others can endure extreme cold and complete dryness for years at a time. The valleys also contain several other bizarre features. Blood Falls, for example, where iron-rich water flows from a glacier and turns bright red when exposed to air. Frozen lakes that never melt, and rocks that mysteriously move across the valley floors, leaving trails behind them. Because the environment is so pristine and scientifically valuable, access is extremely restricted. The valleys are designated as an Antarctic Specialty Managed Area, which means you can't just decide to visit. Getting permission requires submitting detailed research proposals to national Antarctic programs, a process that can take 6 months or more. Only researchers with approved scientific projects can visit, and they must pass medical examinations and survival training before being allowed in. Transportation is by military cargo planes that land on ice runways. Footprints in the valleys can last for decades because nothing disturbs them. So if you somehow got to visit, you'd have to watch your step. Tier 5. Lascaux Caves. Picture being a teenager in southwestern France in 1940. The war's on, but life in the village still moves quietly. You're out walking your dog when it finds a hole where a tree comes up by the roots. It starts digging, and you realize the ground doesn't end where it should. A few days later, you return with 3 friends. You brought ropes and lanterns. You widen the hole, and discover it's a cave shaft dropping about 50 feet. Being brave teenagers, you decide to explore. You climb down into the darkness and find paintings covering the cave walls. Not crude stick figures, but sophisticated, beautiful art showing horses, bulls, deers, and other animals. The paintings show remarkable skill and movement. Congratulations! You just discovered the Lascaux Caves, one of the most important collections of prehistoric art ever found. The paintings are between 17,000 and 20,000 years old. The caves contain over 600 paintings and 1,500 engravings. The artists didn't have modern tools, so they worked with what they had. Ochre for reds and yellows, manganese and charcoal for black. They also used the cave's natural contours to create 3-dimensional effects. By 1948, the caves were open to the public. Eventually, about 1,200 visitors came per day, but all those visitors were slowly destroying what they came to see. Every person brought in carbon dioxide, body heat, and humidity. Skin oils rubbed off on walls, and bacteria began growing on the paintings. By the early 1960s, conservators noticed alarming changes. Green and white fungi were growing on the paintings. Calcite crystals were also forming. In 1963, the French government made a difficult decision. They closed the original Lascaux Caves to the public, forever. The only people allowed inside would be a small number of scientists and conservators. The decision was controversial, but the government held firm. The closure worked. Over the following decades, conservators removed the fungi and crystals. The paintings stabilized. But what about all those people who wanted to see the caves? To appease them, the French government built Lascaux II, an exact replica of the most important chambers. The replica uses the same pigments and techniques the original artists used. Later replicas were created. Lascaux III is a traveling exhibition. Lascaux IV is an even more complete replica using the latest technology. The original Lascaux Caves remains one of the world's most forbidden places, because the paintings are too important to risk, and represent our species' earliest artistic achievements. Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. Some forbidden places hide objects so sacred that protecting them becomes a religious duty. The Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Axum, Ethiopia is one of those places. It claims to house the Ark of the Covenant. According to tradition, the Ark was a sacred chest built to hold the stone tablets with the 10 Commandments. It was the holiest object in Judaism, kept in the temple in Jerusalem. About 26,000 years ago, the Ark disappeared. Ethiopian Christians believe the Ark was brought to Ethiopia over 3,000 years ago by Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Is that true? Nobody knows because Ethiopian authorities won't let anyone examine it. Not archaeologists, not historians, not even the head of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Only one person on earth is allowed to see the Ark, a single guardian monk, chosen for life. Whenever a guardian dies, he picks his replacement. He lives next to the church, never leaves, and spends every day praying before the Ark and burning incense. He cannot have visitors, and he cannot speak about what he sees. This tradition has gone on for centuries. Believers argue the Ark is too sacred to be treated like a museum piece or tourist attraction. Showing it to outsiders would be a profound violation. Skeptics say the Ethiopian Ark might not even be real. There's no way to check, and authorities will never allow it. But here's the thing, the truth doesn't matter. What matters is that Ethiopian Christians believe it's real, and they've structured their religious life around protecting it. Thousands of pilgrims visit Axum each year. They come to pray at the church, but none of them ever see the Ark. All they see is the building, guarded by a single monk who will never reveal what's inside. Hashima Island. Not all cultural heritage sites are protected because they're beautiful. Some are forbidden because they are dangerous reminders of dark history. From a distance, Hashima Island looks like a battleship. The silhouette of tall concrete buildings rising from the ocean resembles a warship, earning it the nickname Battleship Island, or Gunkanjinma in Japanese. Up close, it looks like the apocalypse. Hashima is an abandoned coal mining facility located off the coast of Nagasaki. This tiny island, only about 16 acres in size, was once one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Over 5,000 coal miners and their families lived here in massive apartment blocks, crammed together like sardines. The coal mine opened in the late 1800s and operated for nearly a century. The island was developed by Mitsubishi, and they made sure to build everything needed for a complete community. Apartment buildings, schools, shops, a hospital, a movie theater, and even a swimming pool. The buildings were constructed right to the island's edge, with concrete seawalls protecting them from waves. The facilities were there all right, but the truth is, living conditions in Hashima were harsh. Apartments were tiny, often just 1 or 2 small rooms for entire families. The coal mine was dangerous, with frequent accidents. During World War II, the island became even darker. Korean and Chinese laborers were forcibly brought here as part of Japan's wartime conscription program. They worked under brutal conditions with inadequate food, safety equipment, or medical care. Many died from accidents, malnutrition, or disease. When coal mining ended in 1974, everyone left. Within months, the entire island was abandoned. For over 30 years, no one was allowed to visit. The building slowly deteriorated, battered by typhoons and ocean salt. Concrete crumbled, walls collapsed, staircases leading nowhere hung over empty space. The island became a ghost town, slowly consumed by nature and decay. The Japanese government declared the entire island off limits for decades due to safety concerns. And those concerns are valid. Buildings collapse without warning, Chunks of concrete regularly fall from crumbling structures, old mining shafts create hidden dangers underground, and rusty metal protrudes from broken walls. The island is literally falling apart. In recent years, limited guided tours have been allowed, and visitors can walk on a small marked path along one edge of the island. Most of the island remains completely forbidden because the structural instability makes it deadly to explore. Tier 6. Vatican Apostolic Archive. Imagine walking through 53 miles of shelving packed with documents that stretch back more than 1,200 years. Letters exchanged between popes and kings, records from church councils, quiet, classified correspondence from World War II, files on scandals, alleged miracles, and accusations of heresy. If it happened inside the church, it probably left paperwork behind. All of that lives inside the Vatican Apostolic Archive, a collection that holds some of the most sensitive documents ever written and keeps them firmly out of public reach. For most of its history, this place was known as the Vatican Secret Archive. But the word secret in the archive's old name doesn't mean hidden. In Latin, secretum means personal or private. The archives aren't secret in the sense of being unknown, they're private, belonging to the Pope and the Catholic Church. That said, getting access is incredibly difficult. The archives officially opened to scholars in 1881, but opened is a generous way to put it. Researchers must have a legitimate academic purpose and university affiliation. They must request specific documents, meaning you need to already know what you're looking for. You can't browse. Even researchers who get approved don't exactly have free rein. They work in monitored reading rooms and are never allowed into the actual storage areas, which remain completely off limits. Access is controlled down to the smallest detail. On top of that, researchers can only view documents up to a specific cutoff date. For decades, that line stopped at 1939. In 2020, Pope Francis pushed it forward to 1958, opening a small but carefully managed window into a more recent and sensitive chapter of church history. So why keep so much hidden? The files include confessions, misconduct reports, and political correspondence. The Vatican deals with governments as often as it does with God, which means making those letters public won't turn diplomacy into gossip. Some people still argue the secrecy goes too far. The church has been criticized for limiting access to records about the Inquisition, its relationship with Nazi Germany, and internal investigations into clergy abuse. That said, it's hard to pretend these are normal filing cabinets. The archives hold the 1521 bull that excommunicated Martin Luther, personal letters from Michelangelo, the full records of Galileo's trial, Henry VIII's request for an annulment, and paperwork tied to the Crusades. Calling that sensitive material feels like an understatement. The Vatican has started digitizing parts of the archive, but that process is slow, expensive, and selective. Certain collections get priority, which means the first things released are usually the least controversial. The messier correspondence, the stuff that could reopen old arguments, stays right where it's always been. Room 39. The headquarters of Room 39 is said to be inside the Workers' Party complex in Pyongyang. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's believed to run one of the most secret money operations on the planet. According to intelligence agencies and North Korean defectors, Room 39 was created in the 1970s under Kim Jong-il. Its job is simple: generate foreign currency for North Korea's leadership. How it does that is anything but simple. The organization allegedly controls a web of overseas bank accounts, shell companies, and trading firms spread across multiple countries, all designed to quietly funnel money back to the regime. There's no public record of how Room 39 operates. Everything we know comes from defector testimony, intelligence leaks, and investigative reporting. Those sources claim the group runs legitimate businesses like hotels, restaurants, and trading companies, while also being linked to illegal activities, ranging from counterfeiting and drug production to insurance fraud. Because of this, many countries have sanctioned companies suspected of being tied to Room 39. Estimates of how much money it brings in vary wildly, but experts believe it generates hundreds of millions of dollars each year, possibly more. That money is thought to fund the lavish lifestyles of North Korea's top leadership and help bankroll state projects, including weapons programs, despite international sanctions. Inside North Korea, Room 39 is considered the core of what analysts call the regime's court economy, a financial system built to serve the Kim family directly. Over the years, related offices have been merged, split, and reorganized, but the basic function has stayed the same: keep the money flowing, keep it hidden, and never explain how it works. Mezhgorye and the closed cities. Beyond Mount Yamantau, Russia has dozens of so-called closed cities, and Mezhgorye is one of them. These towns were built during the Soviet era to support secret military projects, nuclear research, and weapons development. Even today, Russian citizens need special approval to enter, and foreigners are banned outright. Closed cities operate in a strange gray zone. They're left off public maps, roads end in guarded checkpoints, and residents are expected to keep quiet about where they live and what they do. Families outside aren't told much, and kids grow up learning early that secrecy is normal. The fact that this system survived the Cold War suggests these places are still doing work Russia considers critical. Mezhgorye stands out even by those standards. According to long-running rumors discussed on military and geopolitics forums, the town exists to support something hidden inside Mount Yamantau. Some claim it's a missile facility. Others describe it as the Yamantau Command Point, a national redoubt meant to be used during war or global catastrophe. Forum sources claim the site began as 3 old mines that were no longer profitable. Instead of shutting them down, the Soviet government allegedly repurposed them into a massive underground complex. The idea was to protect key personnel, national assets, and possibly cultural treasures. Estimates suggest it could house around 30,000 people and store food for more than a decade. Before the 1980s, Russia's main emergency shelter was believed to be beneath Moscow, linked by a secret subway system known as Metro 2. Much of that infrastructure is now outdated. Yamantau, by contrast, is said to be far deeper. Some reports claim the main facilities sit at least a kilometer underground, offering protection against almost anything. One detail that keeps coming up is power. Allegedly, an underground river runs through the mountain, and part of it was dammed to generate electricity. Construction timelines are unclear, with claims ranging from the mid-1980s to the early 2000s. Official documents tied to the site remain classified. None of this has been confirmed. All that's certain is that there's a heavily guarded underground military facility near Mezhgorye, and Russia refuses to explain what it's for. Nicosia Buffer Zone. In the heart of Cyprus lies a street that simply stops existing. One moment you're walking through cafes and markets, the next you're facing barbed wire, bullet holes, and silence. This is the Nicosia Buffer Zone, a no man's land where time froze in 1974 and never restarted. Since that year, Cyprus has been split. Greeks in the south, Turks in the north, divided by a UN-controlled buffer zone slicing the island in half. This green line cuts straight through Nicosia, making it the world's only divided capital city. The buffer zone extends approximately 180 kilometers across the island. In the areas where the demilitarized line cuts through the capital, the zone is strewn with abandoned buildings, gardens, deserted streets, and rusted cars left behind when people fled during the conflict in 1974. Picture walking through Nicosia and suddenly encountering walls, barbed wire, concrete barriers, and warning signs. In Nicosia, the Green Line is an almost total exclusion zone and is contained behind high walls, metal gates, barbed wire, and concrete-filled oil drums. The buffer zone is only a few meters wide in some places, meaning you can stand in one part of the city and see the other side just meters away, yet be completely unable to cross. The zone is patrolled by UN peacekeeping forces who have been stationed there since 1974. Their job is to prevent new clashes between Greek Cypriots in the south and Turkish Cypriots in the north. Buildings inside the buffer zone still bear bullet holes from the fighting 50 years ago. Access to Nicosia is strictly controlled, and it's been that way for decades. There are now multiple generations of Cypriots who have grown up with and grown accustomed to the divide in the heart of their capital city. Regular people are banned from entering, except at official crossing points. For the most part, the UN controls who enters and who leaves. What makes the Nicosia buffer zone particularly haunting is that it's not a remote wilderness or dangerous contaminated zone. It's the middle of a functioning capital city. On both sides of the buffer zone, people live normal lives. They go to work, shop at stores, eat at restaurants, but between them lies this forbidden strip where nature has begun reclaiming urban space. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.